Hello guys, buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches. Welcome to another Spanish 101 video. Today we are going to talk about another important group of words, adjectives, or in Spanish, los adjetivos. Okay, so as always, let me start with a short review. We have already talked about three big groups of words that exist in both English and Spanish. We have talked about articles, about nouns, and about verbs. I hope you recall that nouns are the words that name the stuff of the world, right? Living beings, places, ideas, things. And then verbs are the words we use to talk about actions. And articles come before the noun and they give us a little bit of information about it. They tell us whether it's a specific thing or a thing in general, right? So let's look at a sentence. A sentence about your current reality, in fact. And let's think about where the article, the noun, and the verb are in it. The professor is boring. I know, that is a very good description of myself. But let's focus on the grammar, not the content. The professor is boring. Okay? Where are the article, the noun, and the verb? So we said the article comes before the noun and it tells us whether it's specific or general. Well, this is our article. In fact, it is our definite article, the, so it tells us that we're talking about a specific professor. Of course, we talk about myself, as always, right? That's our article. How about our noun? Where is our noun? Right here, right? Professor is a living being. That is the noun that names him, right? And the action, where is the action here? Is, right? That is our action, that is our verb. We said that to be is the most basic action there is, right? So in this sentence we have an article, a noun, and the verb, and we have yet another type of word, right? What is it? Today we will start studying that type of word. It's an adjective. So where is the adjective in the professor is boring? Well, you already know that, right? It's right here. That's our adjective. Boring is an adjective. So what is an adjective? Quite simply, adjectives are words that we use to describe nouns. Okay? An adjective always describes a noun. It gives us some information about it, but some information that is a lot more specific and concrete than just whether it's in general or a specific thing, right? Much more information than the article. For example, tall. That is an adjective and it tells us whether, the noun is to be described as tall or cold or happy, heavy, strange, confusing, slow, weird. All of those are adjectives. Let's look at some sentences and find the adjectives. The woman drives the yellow car. Right? Both those are articles, right? So we can get rid of those. How about woman? Is that an adjective? No, that's the noun. And car is another noun. Drives is our verb, so yellow is our adjective, right? Even if you think about it, it describes the car, right? It gives us some information about the car. It tells us about its color, so it's an adjective. How about the man sleeps in the big bed? Where in these few words is the one that is given information about a noun? Big, right? That is our noun. It's giving us some information about the bed, namely that it's big. How about the old clock rings in the morning? Which word in here gives information about a noun? Which one describes it? Old, right? Old describes the clock, right? It tells us that it is not, a new clock. It is one of those very old big pendulum things. So that is our adjective. And how about the coffee is good? Well, good is our adjective here, right? It gives us some information about the coffee, some very important information, because drinking bad coffee is quite terrible, right? So that is what adjectives do. They describe nouns, okay? With that said, let's move on to adjectives in Spanish, okay? I'm going to give you some rules that apply specifically to adjectives in Spanish, and they do not apply to adjectives in English. So let's pay attention to these rules. First of all, in English, if you think about it, adjectives typically are placed before the noun. You say the boring professor. If you want to describe me, you say the pretty student, the big books, the serious books, the heavy books, right? All of those come before the noun. Boring professor, pretty student, big books, serious books, slow class, boring class, right? The adjective is coming always before the noun. In English, in Spanish, it always comes after. Look at these. El profesor aburrido. Aburrido means boring. And if you notice, it does not come before profesor. It comes after. El profesor aburrido. In English, you would say the boring professor. Boring comes first. In Spanish, you say el profesor aburrido. Aburrido comes second. La estudiante inteligente. The intelligent student, right? And a female student in this case, because it's la estudiante. Well, inteligente would go after, not before. Same thing with both other cases. El libro grande, this is a big book, but you don't say big book. In Spanish, you say libro grande, adjective after the noun. La ventana pequeña, the small window. Same thing, adjective after the noun. La ventana pequeña, okay? Adjectives in Spanish come after the noun, not before, okay? And even more importantly, if you recall, nouns in Spanish have gender. Well, adjectives have gender as well. And adjectives must always have the same gender as the noun that they describe. Or, if you want to say it in a more elaborate, specific fashion, we say that adjectives must correspond in gender with the nouns they describe. Basically, they need to have the same gender. So if you have a noun that is masculine, the adjective must be masculine. If you have a noun that is feminine, the adjective must be feminine. Let's think about a boring book and a boring professor. But I'm going to make that boring professor female. So, el libro aburrido. Right? Aburrido is the masculine version of aburrido, right? Of boring. We use that masculine version because libro, I hope you recall this, is a masculine noun. You also say la profesora aburrida. In this case, it's la profesora, it's not el profesor, right? So we say aburrida and not aburrido. We use a feminine form of the adjective. When the noun is masculine, the adjective is masculine. When the noun is feminine, the adjective is feminine as well. Okay? So, how exactly do you change the gender of adjectives? Well, there's a few rules that you need to remember. I'm always going to give you in vocab lists, like the one I'm going to give you for this video, I'm always going to give you the masculine version of an adjective. So the question is, how do you change that masculine form for a feminine form? For adjectives that end in O, simply use O for masculine and A for feminine, right? The basic rule of gender that we had studied. So if you see aburrido in your vocab entry, which means boring, that means that for the feminine you change the O for an A. El libro aburrido, la profesora aburrida. Okay? O changes for an A. That one's simple. Then you have adjectives that end in E in the vocab entry, like inteligente, which means intelligent, that ends in an E, in an A, inteligente. Well, in those, there is no change. Look at these two examples. El estudiante inteligente. It's el estudiante, that means it's a male student, so inteligente. But look at the second one, la estudiante inteligente. I did not change the adjective, right? No change for adjectives that end in E. Then, for adjectives that end in the consonants R or N, R or N, you need to add an A for the feminine form. Okay, you just add an A. You don't change anything, you add an A. Okay, for example, canzón, that means tiring. I know today I'm using a lot of negative adjectives for describing things that have to do with study. What do you know? Sometimes I do that, right? So canzón means tiring. It's an adjective that ends in N, right? So el libro canzón, I'm using the masculine here, but I want to say la clase, that means the class, and clase is feminine. So I have to change canzón for canzona, right? I added an A to create the feminine form of that adjective. Now, aburridor, that's another way of saying boring, okay? Aburridor. I would say that it's a little stronger than aburrido. Aburridor, it's like it inflicts boredom on you, okay? Aburridor. That ends in an R. So in order to change that for a feminine, you add an A. Aburridora. El libro aburridor, the boring book. La clase aburridora, the boring class. Okay? So for adjectives that end in R or N, add an A for the feminine form. And then for adjectives that end in all other consonants, there is no change. If it ends in a consonant but it's not an R, it's not an N, you don't change it. El libro difícil, that's the difficult book. La clase difícil. Okay? Adjectives that end in O in your vocab list, change them for an A for the feminine. Adjectives that end in E, there is no change. Adjectives that end in N, add an A. Adjectives that end in R, add an A. Adjectives that end in any other consonant, no change. Those are the rules for changing the gender of adjectives from masculine to feminine in Spanish. Okay? Muchas gracias, muchachos. Hasta luego.